I am thrilled now to bring you another guest. This is Malki Rodal. Oh, Malki, we haven't spoken in so long. I don't even know if I pronounced your last name right. Did I pronounce it
Perfect.
right? Okay,
Yes.
okay, phew, phew. Um, so Malki, the last time you and I spoke, it was at a point where you had just given birth to your triplets,
Hmm.
and but two of them didn't make it, and you had Maymay, who was delicious and yummy, and who was, I think, a few months old, 3,
Yeah.
6, something like that. Um, and we spoke about your journey of loss, of how you had these babies, and then they weren't part of your life anymore in this world, but they were still very much sitting on you, and you were carrying them with you as you raised your child and raised your other children, that they were
Hmm.
still very much a part of your life. It is now a number of years later. Can you give us an update as to where you have been? Where has your life taken you since then?
Okay. Um, it's crazy that it's been a couple of years. Like it feels like it was yesterday. Um, but at the same time, it feels like a lifetime ago. There was such a so last time we spoke, we had just moved to Newcastle, which is like a regional area in Australia. We had a new shlichus position where we had opened a Chabad house, reaching out to Jews in this area, and our surviving triplet was thriving. And there was a very delicate, cautious sense of relief. Like we had this crazy story of loss, but we've come out the other side. We're good. We're okay. That was a chapter that we are now closing. Um, as probably everyone remembers, 2020 was a time of COVID, and we had our own struggles here in Australia with lockdowns and everything. Um, but I think May was almost 2, and we found out we were expecting, and it was a whole crazy story because of the lockdowns. I was locked out of mikvahs because there was nowhere. Um, I feel like I'm touching on things that need to be explained, but essentially it was complicated. It was complicated to find a mikvah, and it was a whole long story. And that month I got pregnant, and I felt like it was such a warm hug from God saying, I see the struggles that you went through. I see the like day-to-day challenges, and here's a gift. And obviously there was a certain amount of cautious anxiety because of our previous losses. But the whole time I told myself, this isn't the same kind of pregnancy. That was a fluke. That was, it was a complicated triplet drama. This is just a straightforward garden variety pregnancy. Everything's going to be fine. Um, except that it wasn't. When I was 22 weeks pregnant, um, on a Friday night, I had a moment of quiet. I gone to put May down. He was 2.5, I guess. Put him to sleep before all our guests arrived. And I was sitting in the quiet room and realized that I hadn't felt the baby move in a while. He'd probably been moving for a few weeks already. And my initial, I remember so clearly that feeling of my heart dropping into my gut, and all my brain space of, it's fine, it's just the anxiety, this is a different pregnancy. It wouldn't push it away. Except that I had a massive room full of Shabbos guests arriving, so we didn't really have time for that. So I sort of pushed it to the side, hoping that it was just because I was tired or just because whatever. um but I've learned now that the mother's intuition knows, like that gut feeling when you're a woman, what's going on. And we ended up going into, it's a very long story and we can tell it another time, but we ended up going in to have a checkup, assuming that it'd just be another, false alarm and it'd be fine and they'd send us home. And they couldn't find a heartbeat. And the baby was very dead. Like there was nothing they could do. The baby was gone. And that started a whole new chapter, because we were now in that category of recurring loss. For me, it was a complete, it wasn't like, oh, I've done this before, I know what I'm doing, because it was a completely different situation. We lived far from family and friends. We were on our own. And also there was no baby to take home. With the triplets, we lost babies and we took home a baby. Here, it was just that silence that I'm sure people can relate to. Because we live in a, isolated area, we are the Chevra Kadisha. Like,
Wow.
people talk about metaphorically taking home your baby in a box. Like, I had to go down to the hospital and pick up this styrofoam box. And right, like you just think, why is this, like, not why is this my life, because the whys don't help, but just what is going on? And after that, there was that, it was really hard after that, because here were two instances of random, in quotation marks, loss. So the triplets was a crazy story, and after that I was like, okay, that was it, chapter closed. But the next pregnancy, again, ending in loss for a completely different reason, a completely random reason. I just felt like I have no control. Like, I have no idea what's going on. If we fast forward a whole lot through a whole lot of grief and struggles and tears, now we have a delicious, gorgeous baby who's 3 months old. He is just a light in our lives. But pregnancy after loss, and especially after losses, plural, is excruciating. And I know that for people who are yearning to get pregnant, probably hearing that feels like I'm being selfish, like, at least you can get pregnant. But first of all, there's no at least. We know that from I Was Supposed to Have a Baby, right? Aimee tells us all the time, there's no at least. There's no pain Olympics. But also, yeah, I hated every day of that pregnancy because I was so scared. And, I feel like when you say anxiety, it's more about things that won't happen, but you're still worried almost. I was sure that we wouldn't get to having a baby, because why would we? Like, history had shown that it continues to repeat itself. And it was a really, really long pregnancy. Even till the day that he was born, I couldn't fully open my heart to accept that we were having a baby until he was alive and crying in my arms, which is really sad as a mother to, like, almost not trust that process that is so natural. But that's where we are. And thank God this time we made it to the finish line.
I I know your story because of the pieces that you have shared on your social media, on your platform. And yet, like, I'm sitting here and just listening, and everything that you're saying is bringing back all of my pregnancy after loss stuff.
Right?
Exactly what you just said, that you didn't believe that he was going to be alive until the moment he came out of your body. I will tell you that, so many of you know out there in the I Was Supposed to Have a Baby community, that my last pregnancy was a twin pregnancy. And I was scheduled for a C-section because they were both breech. And
Wow.
the morning of our C-section, I had 3 other children at the time. I put my children on the bus. and I didn't tell them a word about how I was
Mhm.
going to the hospital to have these babies.
Yeah.
I kept like, I did not believe at all that I was going to come home with one, let alone two,
Yeah.
with one
Yeah.
that was going to be alive. I
I have
did not believe
goosebumps.
it. Did not believe it until the moment they took those babies out and they put them on my chest.
Mm,
Yes.
mm.
Yes. Okay. I have a question. So we need to do some editing. Um, here is I have two other questions for you before we finish today with this just very short recap.
Yeah.
One is, you've been public about your story for a
Mm.
very long time, a very long time. Do you have any regrets, or do you do you think that it helped you? Do you think that now, do you have people coming to you via either social media or in your real life, especially also with this, with that 20-week loss, that 22-week loss of that baby, where I mean, at that point you didn't have a choice, right? Everybody knew you were pregnant, and then
Mm.
everybody knew you were not pregnant, but you
Yeah.
already had a story of loss. Was it helpful for you? Is it helpful for you? How do you feel about it now?
Mm. I think that right from the beginning, my intention was always to be able to tell my story in my words. Um, with our first loss, we still lived in a beautiful insular Jewish community where everyone knows each other's business, which is a beautiful thing and also can be hard when you're going through something that you might want to keep private. And originally, I wanted to be able to tell our story in our own words. But very quickly, I realized how cathartic it was, how therapeutic it was for me to put my chaos that was in my brain and that like mush of just that tangle of emotions into words. And like putting it into words helped me understand myself. Um, and I probably could have just left it at that as writing in my journal, but that's the second thing that you touched on. People felt seen in my words, people who had never said to anyone, never talked about their losses with anyone, reached out and said, "You're describing my story. You're touching on these emotions that I haven't thought about for years." These are people who are grandmothers who hadn't given enough of their time to these emotions for whatever reason, and all of a sudden had words that I had written that they related to. So that definitely gave me an extra push to share what I was writing. But I know that when I read other people's words, so many of the things that you share on your platform are so I don't know what the word is. Like it's more than important. It feels like your soul is being seen. And it's not necessarily something that we talk about, face to face all the time, either because it's taboo or because it's too hard. And having someone normalize it, having someone say, "That's not crazy what you're thinking. That is totally normal," is life changing. So I don't regret it, and I will continue to share hopefully good things.
I mean,
And it is vulnerable at times. I think mostly for the people who know me, when I share something really heavy, and then my friends or my family will reach out and be like, "Are you okay?" That makes me feel most vulnerable, but it's an honor to stand in this community.
and we all stand here and wish didn't have to stand here, right? Like this is the worst place. We would never wish this upon anyone. And yet here we are. Here we are. Oh,
Right.
Malki, last question before we finish today. For all the people out there who are going through loss, who are in the depths of their pain, who are thinking about trying again, who may have had one loss or multiple losses,
Mm.
what can you give them as a way of offering them? I'm not going to say hope, because I feel
Right.
like we can't predict the future. We don't know if the next pregnancy is going to be a good one.
Mm.
So hope is not the right word, but I think, what can you give them in terms of the way you coped with
Yeah.
getting through that? I would say that this pregnancy with your delicious 3-month-old Yehuda,
Mhm.
how did you, besides, the not believing it until the moment he was born,
Mm.
how did you get through 9 months?
Yeah. In short, I didn't. Like, no, I think number one is don't judge yourself for having a hard time. Don't judge those negative emotions or that questioning, because it's normal that you're so scared and it's so hard. Um, but I think the main thing is to find the tools that work for you. For me, it was about knowledge. I asked the doctors a million questions because I knew that nobody can predict anything, but for what they could tell me, for the things that I could do, I wanted to know everything. And not every doctor, not every nurse was as gentle as they could be. So I moved on to the next one. Um, I wanted to be able to ask at every single appointment, how many times a day should I feel the baby kicking? And what should I do to make sure that I'm healthy? Even though there are no answers, just having that someone to answer your questions. And I think the same thing in a spiritual sense, finding what talks to you. Because for everyone it's different. And the worst thing is when somebody else puts that on your plate, like, oh, you really should pray more, or you really just got to believe, like, you do not need that. But for
At
yourself,
all,
find ever, regardless of what you're going through.
ever.
But find, be curious, find something that talks to you in the spiritual realm, because pregnancy sort of fits so much more into the spiritual realm than the physical, in terms of there's nothing um, there's nothing material that you can hold on to, really, right? There's no for sures. It's not like if you follow the script, then it will all be fine. It's quite abstract. Pregnancy is abstract. Until the baby's crying, you never know. Um, so yeah, for me, it was a lot of leaning into faith. Um, when I had these thoughts of like, well, who says I'm going to have a baby? Sort of trying to flip it around and say, well, who says that we won't? Um, some days it worked, some days it didn't. But just taking it not even one day at a time, 1 hour at a time. And if you're having a really hard day, honor that. I know not everyone can, but if you can take an hour out because you're really struggling, do that. Sit in a dark room, sit with your baby, hand on your stomach, whether they're moving, yet or not, even if you're really early on, just sort of like breathe into the moment of right now, we're still pregnant, we're still good, and that's all that matters.
Oh gosh, I love that so much. I love that so much. The being present and being mindful and
Mm.
really focusing on what there is right at this moment, and trying to
Mhm.
push the rest of the world away. Ugh,
That
I,
really works.
I love that, and love all of the pieces that you just shared. I Malki, thank you so much for giving a
You.
little bit of yourself here, giving us the update on your life, the pain and the sorrow, and also the joy and the simcha and the beauty, and your delicious little boy. May you only continue to have simchas, to have happy occasions. And we
Mhm.
will definitely, God willing, continue this conversation more fully, because
Yeah.
there is so much more wisdom that we need from you. So stay tuned, everyone. We in an upcoming episode, you will get more of Malki.
It's a
Thank you
pleasure.
so much.
All the best.